standing in a lecture theatre again so soon. Didn't think I'd be back here just 4 or 5 years later, especially in this position. But anyway, we digress. So yeah, welcome. First of all, thank you to NLX, Abellio, Wrightbus and Rock for supporting this event. Without them, obviously we couldn't do it. So thank you very much. Before we dive in, a bit of housekeeping. So don't think there's meant to be a fire alarm today. If there is, back out the door and across the car park. Toilets can be found back in reception, and there'll be some by the refreshments area as well. High-vis jackets, we'll tell you about them later, but please wear them whenever you're given one, and please follow any directions you're given by site guides. We don't want anyone wandering off, etc. For those of you online, you should hopefully know the drill by now, as they say. The meeting will be recorded and the slides will be shared, so don't worry about any of that. If you could keep muted, that would be brilliant. Any questions you have, please save them for the Q&A session and use the chat function. So we've got a packed agenda today. Presentations from myself, NLX, ESP Utilities, Cleaner EV, Wrightbus, Rock and Abellio. Then we'll have a quick refreshment break / networking session back over in the Shannon Suite. And then we'll come back for a 30 to 45 minute panel session discussion and Q&A. Really keen for everyone to get involved, so save up your questions until the end. And then the bit that I think everyone's looking forward to, not the lunch, the site visit and vehicle walk around. And then we'll call it to an end this afternoon. So quick introduction. Don't want to take up too much time. You haven't come here to hear from me particularly. So I'm Tim Griffin. I head up the bus working group here at Zemo Partnership. Quick introduction to the UK market, just to set the scene slightly. So historically, we've had about 2,000 to 3,000 registrations on average, bus and coach that is, in previous years. But since 2015, it's been a shrinking market. Now we're just over 1,000 in the last couple of years. As we know, major uncertainty around things like passenger numbers, post-COVID. Inflationary pressures, we're all too well aware of those, which makes investment planning in zero-emission buses challenging. But despite all that, operators, to their credit, have been working to decarbonise their fleets already, supported, of course, by significant grant funding from both UK government and devolved administrations, to a point today where the UK bus industry is leading the way, leading Europe in terms of zero-emission bus rollout. Our analysis suggests that about 50% of all buses registered in the past 2 years were zero emissions. That's quite the feat. Obviously in a depleted market, but nonetheless impressive. And we expect that trend to continue next year or this year and continue growing going forward. So effectively, zero emission is the standard now for many operators, and battery electric technology, particularly over 95% of all vehicles, is accounting for the vast majority of zero emission buses on the road. So this graph just highlights what I just said. You can see the green line showing the percentage of all new buses that are battery electric. And as I said, the last 2 years, we've seen that equated to about 50% combined with hydrogen buses down there in blue. And like I said, we expect that trend to continue. In terms of where these buses are, London has led the way, probably about 1,000 in service there, over or almost 50% of all of the battery electric buses in the UK. Transport for London, along with operators in London, have been key to driving uptake and technology development ultimately. But as well as London, adoption of BEVs continues elsewhere, thanks to schemes like Zebra, All Electric Bus City, and of course ScotZeb, as well as Welsh and Northern Irish funding. And unfortunately, TfL couldn't be here, but they provided me with a slide to read on their behalf to set the scene on a more local level. So yeah, TfL has made significant strides in upgrading the bus fleet, as we know. There are now over 1,000 zero-emission buses in the city, like I said, a mixture of electric and hydrogen. A further 700 are on order, so plenty more to come. All new TfL buses entering the fleet are required to be zero emission, and around half of all garages now, according to TfL, will have some level of power in the next 12 months. So with all of that, TfL is on track for a 100% zero emission fleet by 2034, and that was brought forward from 2037. And TfL wanted me to highlight that the collaboration between TfL, operators, manufacturers, infrastructure providers is vital to achieving these goals. Without that collaboration and partnership, that wouldn't be possible. And I guess that's why we're here today, to hear how this project at Twickenham's, Abellio Twickenham's depot has got off the ground and is completed, nearing completion, thanks to collaboration between all project partners. So with that, I'll stop waffling and I'll pass over to Jed from NLX, who's going to talk about considerations for operators introducing BEVs and a bit about NLX as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim, for the introduction and for hosting the event today. I must admit it's a superb venue, and I'm looking forward to the day, and also as you mentioned there as well, the depot tour as well, which should be very good. Just to let you know, my personal background is it's not energy, it's public transport. I started with First Bus just after deregulation in the mid to late 80s. That's the best part of 30 years. First in a variety of operational and commercial roles, and latterly I've spent 5 great years at Arriva UK Bus as well, before starting my journey into the electrified ecosystem, which I must admit has been a baptism of fire from my perspective of moving from buses to electrification. And undoubtedly, electrified ecosystems provide I suppose, a realistic solution to lowering cost and decarbonisation of our transport system. And Abellio's electrification strategy, as Tim mentioned there, involves lots and lots of partners. We're going to hear from 2 of the key partners in this today, which is Peter and Craig from Cleaner EV, the ESP Utility Group, about how we've introduced it. And sorry, jumping ahead with the slides. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Who are NLX? We're a global leader in energy transition. We provide consumers, businesses and cities with innovative platform-based solutions. And from my own personal journey today, I really embrace that actually the e-bus side of NLX has almost got the spirit of a startup, backed up by a global innovator in respect of NLX. As you can see from the slide there, the numbers speak for themselves. We serve over 5,000 e-buses internationally, pushing on to 2,000 chargers installed, and also then on the battery energy storage, distribution energy, and also the demand response capacity that we manage, almost 8.5 gigawatts. So this is what I would say is a very dynamic energy landscape. And part of that is obviously the trilemma. We're at a transition point for the industry, industrial revolution of energy 4.0, I believe. And I suppose collectively we're all moving towards a more sustainable, more environmentally friendly way of working. Every business is different in that they have a different mix of whether they need secure, affordable or green energy. And I think Tim alluded it to before, the public transport sector's journey to net zero is really moving quite quickly. TfL want to be carbon neutral by 2030. We want to have a zero emission fleet by 2034. That's approximately another 8,000 vehicles between now and then. First Bus, Stagecoach, similar zero emissions fleets by 2035. And most of the large operators are on a similar kind of pathway to doing that. And previously, I think the only real issues with energy was the sustainability side of things. Obviously, with recent events, energy price volatility driven by Ukraine and grid instability now means that it's a very volatile area that we're in at the minute. And it's obvious that you need a partner that can get you secure energy for your business continuity, obviously sustainable solution as well. And obviously it's got to be affordable for you to make that business case for your own personal businesses. And the big challenge in the public transport arena is actually the actual electrification of your fleet. And in order to kind of do that, it isn't just a matter of switching your fuel, it's a whole transformation that needs to take place. And each depot is different. As you can see there, we put on the screen there six kind of areas that you kind of need to consider. If we look at them all there, you've got your energy, your fleet, your infrastructure, you've got future proofing for your growth, your battery, and obviously your smart data. Again, getting extra data points that bring you efficiencies from your assets and your operations. But with all these kind of key separate areas, it brings with them all areas of different complexities. Now, we just highlighted some of these on the screen, and obviously I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's just highlighting some of the areas that you need to consider when you're electrifying your depots. And if we just look at kind of energy as a first one, as battery electric vehicles overtake your internal combustion engines, the cost that you're spending on fuel against energy will obviously counterbalance, and so you might want to look at green power purchase agreements. The challenge of getting a grid connection is absolutely huge and critical for most businesses. Are there other developments in the area? What are your neighbours doing that could affect the grid connection? Getting energy market access to monetize your assets, and utility bill management. Again, it's another area that you might want to consider, where you can collectively look at all your sites and actually make adjustments to the way you're using energy. And I suppose the greenest kilowatt of energy is the one that you don't use, essentially. So again, that's kind of looking at one of the key areas of the complexity. There's a huge amount of detail within each of those. Within the presentations that Craig and Peter are going to come to, kind of subconscious or not, they're all going to talk about different areas of this kind of ecosystem. And as I said, none of us can work in silo or independently. It needs everybody to collectively come together to provide a solution. And you need an interconnected ecosystem there. So it's designed around your specific needs, and each specific element of this needs to come together, and you need somebody that can pull all this together for you. And that's kind of the crucial role that NLX plays in this electrified ecosystem. So it's bringing all the partners together to make sure that the client's got the solution that's fit for their needs. So I'd like to introduce Peter up really to talk about the role of the IDNO and his background on what they can provide, and also a bit of insight into actually why we're here today as well, which is the Twickenham depot.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. They said warm the crowd up, so I've come to do that. Let me first see if I can operate. Okay, so what we're talking about today is all these systems effectively need a grid connection. They won't work without that grid connection. The network is rather constrained to get that connection. So what does ESP do as far as that's concerned? ESP are an IDNO, and for those in the room who don't know what an IDNO is, it's an independent distribution network operator. Now the difference between us and DNOs such as UKPN, who's in this area, is that we can own and operate networks throughout the UK, and we do that with the same regulation as the DNO. So we have the same regulation, we're licensed by Ofgem, and we have the same regulatory compliance criteria to meet as UKPN do. So we do the bit in between effectively the DNO and the end user. That's the bit of our network. I've been doing it now for, I don't want to repeat this, but 40 years. I think I've been doing the grid connection activity for a number of DNOs and IDNOs in the country. And we formed a team in ESP some 18 months ago to do the grid connection, because we saw it as a need, not just for bus and lorries, but also for EV cars throughout the UK. Currently, we have 600 plus sites in our pipeline, all of high loads throughout the country, and all wanting to build out at speed. So some of our clients want to build out 100 sites within a 12-month period. So there's rapid growth in this area for us and for the bus operators to get to zero carbon. Let's move to that. So just to explain a bit about what we do, clearly the generators on the network put onto the grid the energy, which is transposed down from 400 kV to 75 kV to 132. We do connect at 132 in certain circumstances, and we then transform that down to a primary network. And effectively, we connect to all these operators or businesses outside as our customers. So EV is only one of those customers, and we do it in gas, water, and electricity. So we've got 3 offerings in terms of that, but we're talking about specifically EV today, and yeah, that's what we connect to. Moving further on to hopefully challenges and capabilities. So in terms of the challenges, there are a number of challenges to get a connection from the grid. And they're based on the capacity that is available at the grid. We apply for what's called a point of connection to the grid, and that in itself has its own challenges, because although you might ask for a typical site for a bus depot might be 4 or 5 MVA, the load might not have that capability in it. So therefore, it may need reinforcement activity to go on the DNO's network, and that could take substantial time. Equally, there are other users that want that network capability that are also in the vicinity of most of the bus operators that are trying to capture that network capability, if you want. So there is a challenge there in terms of getting a point of connection to the DNO. And I would say that at the end of the day, the management of that point of connection is really important to the end user. Why? Because if you don't accept that point of connection and you don't pay for that point of connection, then it's likely to go to others, and the network is really constrained out there. So yeah, we've got real issues in terms of the point of connection activity. We manage that through its life cycle. You can lose that point of connection if you don't meet certain criteria along the way. So if you haven't paid for that point of connection, or you haven't done a design and put the design into the distribution network operator in a period of time, you're likely to lose that point of connection. It's a subtle thing, but at the end of the day, it needs to be managed. So we manage about 32 activities with the DNO at any one time. And any one of those 32 activities can lose you the point of connection if you don't do it in the timescale prescribed by the DNO. So we manage all of that, and we inform our clients of the stages that we're going through to get to the end result. We also use, so we're an asset owning company, and that's what we do. We don't build network, we own network when it is built. And then we operate that network for in perpetuity, effectively, for the life of that asset. Yeah, so we go to independent connection providers, and independent connection providers build that network. They're approved independent connection providers. They're NERS registered, so they're Lloyd's NERS registered independent connection providers that can do a multitude of activities on behalf of the client. So in the case of Twickenham, the design was done by an independent connection provider, and the build out was done by an independent connection provider. And we can take that activity on, so we can do the design, and we have a family of ICPs that operate for us. But the relationship effectively of the build out of the network is between client and the ICP. So it's really important that understanding the connection activity, that the project management of the build out of the connection between the grid and the meter is done by the client. It's not done by ESP. We assure the piece between, so we advise clients in terms of what their requirements are and what their needs are and what equipment they need to be procuring. And that procurement of equipment is done in a number of ways. So the client can procure equipment in their own right. And we have clients that specifically do that. We've got large operators that do that because they have specific buying capability to buy the network, buy the equipment going on that network in volume. We also have clients like Twickenham where the ICP has procured equipment, which you'll see this afternoon in terms of the substation build out, and then provide that to the site at the time that it's required to connect it up. Another big issue, I suppose, and we need to touch on this because it's really, really important, and a lot of people don't quite understand land rights. So land rights have a detrimental effect, in effect, of getting a connection live. You would think that it's quite an easy thing to sort out the land rights, but it is a particular arduous task in terms of owning the land that you want to operate on and that you want your infrastructure to sit on. You may be leasing land, and you may have a parent, or you may have a number of owners of that land or interested parties in that land where equipment needs to sit. Now, ESP will only adopt network, and the DNOs will only adopt network that has got the full legal rights to then look after that network for its life. Really important that part of the jigsaw is put together and started in the early stages, because even at the quickest point, we would say you'll never get the legals resolved in less than 12 weeks. And in some circumstances, worst case scenarios, we've had taken over a year to get those legals over the line. So I would say if you're thinking about infrastructure, you're thinking about putting that on your sites, then think about the legal side of it and think about the ownership of the land that you want to utilise for the infrastructure to sit on. The size of that infrastructure, well, you'll see this afternoon at Twickenham, it's not minuscule in terms of the size of equipment that's going on there. Normal domestic house has a cutout and it fits in a little box on the side of the house. We're talking about 4 meters by 4 meters for the substation alone. And then the LV equipment that goes with that. It's quite substantial space that's taken up for charging equipment. Equipment procurement is another activity that we touch on in terms of assuring our customers that they're buying the right equipment. Really important that it is specified for a DNO or an IDNO to adopt that network. We don't want to get to the end of the road when we come to energise it and the wrong equipment has been procured, and therefore we can't adopt at that stage. So we do some assurance to make sure that the client understands the equipment that they're buying and that it fits the bill for the end user and the chargers. The other thing I just want to touch on is transparency. Okay, so we have a very transparent system in terms of the stages that we go through to get to the end energization. So we walk our clients through that stage, those stages. And as I say, we track 32 items within the activity that we're doing from starting the connection project to energization. And I think it's really important that the client understands and knows what stage they're at. So we have weekly meetings with all our clients and we run through their sites one by one, stage by stage, so they're fully abreast of the situations and the constraining factors that may prevent them getting energizations in a timely manner. We're here to provide a service. ESP are here to provide a service. we're here to make the connection easy. Right? It's not easy. We've all found that out. It's been a big learning curve for all of us over the past 12 to 18 months. And we're climbing that curve, and we've learned a lot over that period of time. And I think it's really useful today to take something away about the things that we've learned. We're all here to talk to you about the things that didn't go quite right and the things that went perfectly well. And I think it's really important that we all take that away. I'm here as well to learn, as well as to advise you in terms of your grid connection activity. But yeah, there were times when things haven't gone perfectly well. I'll admit that. But let's learn from that, move forward, and get a great connection going forward. So yeah, if anybody wants to talk to me about grid connections after, I'll be here all day. I'll be at Twickenham site to let you into a substation, and take that time, because once a substation goes live, you'll never see inside it again. Simply because it's a dangerous place to be if you don't know what you're doing. This particular substation isn't live, it's under construction at this moment in time. So take it as it is under construction, it's not completed. There are things that you might see that are not as tidy as they should be, as the finished product. Yeah, so I make no bones about that. It is a construction activity. It's not quite as it would be when it's handed over and adopted and running in terms of its full potential. But I'll be there on site to explain the bits and pieces that go into a substation, because, you know, at the end of the day, once those doors are locked, you'll never get in there again. Okay, so take that opportunity just to have a look inside a substation. Not many people know what's inside, and it is interesting. Well, interesting to me. Okay, I'll hand over to Craig now. I think is there anything else? Sorry, this is the team that we operate doing EV. It's grown over the period. 18 months ago, it was 4 people, and now it's up to 14, I believe, at last count. So we've got people doing all sides of the activity. Thanks very much.
Morning, everybody. I guess it's Peter's slide. That's me. So I'm Craig, Technical Director of Cleaner EV. It's his first time I've ever done a PowerPoint presentation. Just bear with me if you don't go quite right. So Twickenham. So we've done quite a few depots for Abellio and NLX successfully. All on time, in budget, high standard. And we started to look at this depot about a year ago, April in 2022. As with any depots, especially in London, the availability of power and space is a major constraint. Fortunately, the grid connection, as Peter's touched on, isn't my department, but where to put stuff is. We're looking at a number of factors. When we look at these, there's a number of factors we need to look at. Where we're going to put stuff, substation, switchgear, chargers, where the buses park. But from our point of view, it's also trying to look at the next phases after that. I've been speaking to Alistair before, I don't realise wherever you are, about doing things after phases 2, 3 and 4 without ripping out what we've done, taking out downtime when we're trying to upgrade the system. Because if these depots are out of action for 16 weeks, Abellio won't running buses. It's quite simple. So there's a lot of pre-planning and design goes into these. That's even slide there. So we future-proof the site as much as we can. We've been in the industry a lot of years of doing this, and it pains us to see really high quality work we've installed only a few years ago being ripped out for bigger equipment because what we installed back then is now not fit for purpose. It's a growing industry we're in. They're getting bigger and bigger, these projects. So wherever practical, in my opinion, architects, designers, clients should look to future-proof these projects as much as possible. Take into account the major constraints, which quite honestly is mainly financial. But the clients can't spend a load of budget from today that in 5 years' time. Touching it there.
So a major thing is having downtime of phase one when next phase is done in the years to come. So for example, Twickenham, we might be doing some work in 2 years' time if we get the project. And if we have to take out the switchgear we're putting now and upgrade it, it could be 10, 16 weeks at Abellio running buses. That's not good enough, in our opinion. So that's a major factor we've got to do, is looking at downtime. Keeping the depot fully operational. Okay, it's down. Fully operational all times throughout each of the phase projects. When we've done other depots and similar works over the years, one big factor to us is that when more charges are added to the site, the biggest problem the client will be the downtime, which I've touched on before. If the buses aren't running, Abellio aren't making money. So for the next few weeks, months, we got a lot of ideas are banded around about locations on things. Loads of drawings came out, lots of meetings, how to site stuff. These aren't my drawings, they're Yanis Architectures. A lot of work's going into these, how to do 100% of the site. And the final layout was on this one. If you know, you'll see the site when you get there, but this is showing phase one. I think it's 30 buses, 16 charges, got one spare. It's got the substation and the LV panel board, which you'll see when you go to site later this afternoon. But we have to take into account on that phases 2, 3, 4, how many, if it ever happen, which they will do. Now we have the locations of the buses, the chargers, switchgear, the substation. We need to work back from each charger. How much power each charger needs affects the size of cables. Each charger, the civils, the GRP, the switchgear. I stated before, we really do want to deliver the best project for our client with the budget we have made a deal on. So it's really important that the client gets, I won't say free, but it's no cost to themselves, as much as they can for the value for the money. Right? So on this project, and so it's not free, but it's working with the budgets we've got. We upgraded the main panel board, which you'll see from 2,500 amp to 3,200 amp. Right? It's quite obvious to me that what was specified wasn't big enough for future use, so we upgraded it. Ducts and trenches installed at the same time for upcoming works. We're actually we've ripped this car park up. We've got a big plant on site. It's easy for us to dig a wider trench and put more ducts in for future use of chargers that now than it is to bring it back after. Right, so we just did it, no problem at all. NLX supplied 150 kilowatt chargers, which was what we needed, but they supplied them in the body of a 300 kilowatt charger. Right. With this, the client in years to come can add rectifiers to the chargers, and we'll open one up for you today. It's actually, they're only half full, and they can have probably 200 kilowatt of charging from these chargers. No real major costs or upgrades if they ever need it. This is a funny one for me. Cables wired with enough capacity for 200 kilowatts of current if they ever need them. That sounds great, does that, didn't it? Actually, it was a mistake, because when we ordered the cables for the chargers, all the cables were out of stock. So we just took it on the chin and ordered bigger cables, pulled it in, and it's all there ready to go, if it's ever needed, that is. Pre-construction. This is my team, and they're meant to be here today, but they've all bottled it, and they're all on site cleaning chargers, because a lot of bird poos on the chargers. Spent all day doing that. So you've got Mark, Dan, and Ben. These are guys on site. You'll see them today. They're really nice guys. They're not guys for lecture rooms, but they're on site. Speak to them if you want to. This is where it gets a bit more serious, and hand it on to my team of 3, which are here today. Well, we also need to mention a guy called Lee Webster from NCU. He's not here at present, but he's on another project for us. They take control and deliver the project. And they do a cracking job, to be honest. Nothing's too hard for them. The main obstacles we need to overcome in these projects is working with the depot manager, to be honest. It's all out of our hands then. The depot needs to be, they need to allow for the full fleet of the buses in on a night and Christmas Day. So it's not as if we can have like this is our set, we're building something here, this is our segment, get out of it. We've got to get it back every night. Working with the depot manager is a really important thing for us, because they know exactly what we're doing, what's going where, and no problem's too small for them. So we have daily, our team have daily meetings every day of what's been happening. Bus depots are living, breathing operations. They need to be kept 100% operational all the time. And I'll be honest, it's not an easy task, but we did it. But we do it. The construction bit. I won't go through the eye of the needle, nitty-gritty of the process, but this project had some unique and exhilarated elements to it on this site. The car park age and construction. As you can see there, guys, I'm struggling to think. The 200-year-old granite set cobbles with tram lines in it, about 9 millimeters underneath some tarmac, right? It was I think my lads cried when they pulled it back, to be honest. I think that it was a Friday night in November, they pulled it back, and I think they cried and went home. It wasn't easy, right? How do we get around it? Just sheer elbow grease, to be honest, determination. There's no other way of doing it. You just got to crack on with the job. So you see a photo there. It looks like a swimming pool. And this is where actually the site of the GRP housing is. And again, I think I had sleepless nights for this. Because when we dug that out, we could have found anything underneath there. And as you'll see on site, there's nowhere else for the switchgear to go. We could have found a Roman fort. We could have found LV cables, HV cables, drains, anything. And when we pulled that back, I just went to the pub after celebrating because we knew the job could happen. So that hole was so important to us. Wait, I'm missing a few slides. Here we go. Keeping the site constantly tidy and compact. Mentioned this every night. The site went back to a small compound. Every morning it went back out. Right. It's just keeping the site flowing for the client. We're in England, it's weather. There's a photo there where that hole's full up. It's like a swimming pool. I think they went for a bath in it, did lads. But again, you just got to get on with it. This one needs mentioning. It's not a major one, but there were strikes on site while we were here, sometimes 2 days a week. It affects us. We had the full fleet in for 2 days a week sometimes. We couldn't get on with do what we were doing. Did we complain? No. We just knew the job before it cracked on. There's no point moaning, just get the job done. It's something that really needs to be focused on here. Everyone who works on this project, from Abellio, NLX, NLX Way, ESP, Yanis, the architects, Latchman's the consultant. We have a really good working relationship. Every Monday we have a meeting at 10 o'clock online, and touch wood, we've never had an argument, but really, all parties have worked really well to deliver these projects. At Clean EV, we pride ourselves on a few simple things. All right. Yeah. In the sales pitch, I'd like to say we approach things differently than others, which are things delivered on time. Touch wood, everything's delivered on time. If they aren't, we'll bend over backwards to it till they are. We're not a big company. We're not like an NLX or like that. We're only a small company, but these projects mean a lot to us. I put extremely, I think they are. We do everything to a really extreme high standard. We are proud of these projects. As much less stress on the client as possible. These guys run buses. They don't have the time or energy to battle with contractors on site. So let's make it as easy as possible for them. And the last one, which makes the finance people happy. As a company, we don't do variations unless the client asks for something moving when it's in or additional going in. If we've made well, you saw the actual structure of the car park. Some companies have gone back saying, oh, it's a tough one, it's 200-year-old granite sets, let's put some more money in for it. Don't do anything like that. How many specialist principal contractors can you say that about? It all accumulates, in my opinion, to a project we can all be proud of from everyone who worked on it. But more importantly, again, it's important to me personally, a happy client, which is everybody's goal in business. We've got a cheesy emoji at the end of it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, gents, for those presentations. Were amazingly semi on time. So next we'll talk about vehicles, and with that, Wright Bus and Tom Greenshields.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much to Zemo, John, team for having us here to represent the OEM who's in the room. My name's Tom Greenshields. I look after business development for the Bamford Group. To tell you a little bit about the bus company that's here, we can't ignore the double deck things. Who is Wrightbus, a business that has been around since the 1940s, is synonymous with good quality bodies. Running around the country at the moment, very famous for the NRMs that are in London, provided the first single-deck fuel cell electric vehicles into TfL in London. Sadly, the business, for various reasons, didn't survive, and in 2019 went into administration. The business at the time was of interest to the JCB group of companies. The biggest thing around that for them at the time was they were fully aware of the fact that Wrightbus had designed a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and you're moving 13.5 tons of cell for a construction and heavy equipment manufacturing company. That was of great interest. So the business was bought over in 19, taken out of administration, and now is the Bamford Bus Company in trading name, but it is still Wrightbus as we know it. Around that time, we set up a group of companies that were based and have developed over times to support the zero emission market. All Service One, which looks after the ARPA market, the Wrightbus, the funding side of things, where Fuse is our own in-house funding company, but we obviously operate with a number of others out there. On the hydrogen side, we have 3 companies, HiCap, iGen, and Rise. One invests, one builds. Simple fact about it. And unlike the EV market, where you have people like yourselves here who are very much engaged in it, the hydrogen sector needs a lot more love, and say getting gas is a challenge would be an understatement, but it's at the very beginning of a journey where the EV market is far more advanced. But there is a place for both, and we firmly believe that. And Wright's obviously, as I've just described, is the manufacturing business. The plan, in effect, was to try and get to a turnkey solution where we could always planning infrastructure, fuel, bus, care. And the finance, we are always working with partners within the field. It's obviously in our interest. We cannot do everything alone, something that's been touched on already. Our job is to build the best buses we can to the highest standard that we can, and also engage with the best people out there. I'm going to touch on something about, so we do supply double-deck buses across the range. You'll see there's a fuel cell electric vehicle, first in the UK. There's almost 100 of them. We do the Electroliner, which is here in this depot. There's a diesel bus there. We are still supplying a very small number to the marketplace. The manufacturer, we are open to the fact that yes, there is still a place for diesel buses for the next probably 5, 6, 7 years as we get toward zero kind of. And to be quite honest with you, a Euro 6 diesel engine taking out a Euro 4 diesel is a good thing. When it comes to, this is a transition that we're going through. They'll not be around in 10 years' time, but still a place for them at the moment. That transcends into the single deck again across all products: single deck EV, single deck hydrogen, and single deck diesel. Now, because it's Zemo, talk about zero emitting. So we supply to the marketplace the Hydroliner, which is the hydrogen double deck bus, the tanks, rear of the bus, 27 kilograms of hydrogen, roughly about 280 miles, give or take. The 5 kilowatt fuel cell on the back. There's the fluctuations within the battery managed. Therefore, you get a kind of there's about a 20-mile range on battery effectively in them. So if you run out of hydrogen, you can still get home with it. Interesting. You can drive it on and off. You can empty it will operate as a battery. Our electric bus, Electroliner. Designed by the engineers within Wright's during the pandemic, and it was very much designed as an electric bus. It's not a compromise of a body on a chassis. It is absolutely 100% an electric bus, and because of that, it is highly efficient. And keep talking about that. And there's a lot of commonality across both products. Again, same on the single decks, commonality where we can get it. The great thing about single deck when it comes to the hydrogen bus, you have far more room on the roof to put tanks in. The limitation of the double deck, you can only stack them up the back. So you get an outrageous range on a single hydrogen bus up to 1,000 kilometers. And again, you've got far more room on the electric bus, up to 300 miles by adding more battery packs because you have the space for it. We are very proud of the fact that we source as locally as we can. It's sorry, I've got to look. We're very happy that we're sourcing our products as locally as we can. UK and Europe for the electroliner, the component parts, 4C, ZF, Siemens. The Canadian flag that's on the hydrogen bus is the Ballard fuel cell that's in the back of it, which is one thing that Wrights have always prided themselves in. I think this is really important. It comes down to the decision-making process when you're getting into looking at we're going zero emission, where do we go? Is it electric? Is it hydrogen? Simply by the route analysis tool that we've had running for almost 30 years, that takes into consideration Google Maps, topography, stops, weather, wind, loading. You can get to a point where actually you can look at the battery packs and look at the range of a bus. And it's a very binary tool that's been set up with a lot of people smarter than me, and effectively it gives you an answer. And they're given up 10% either way. They're not wrong. So we approach a client when they say, right, we want to look at zero emissions, and the tool will effectively develop what exactly the client needs. And therefore, you're taking it away from a decision of saying, well, we think this bus is best, when actually this is how it works out. It's better. And we back it up with a telematics tool. We monitor the performance of everything. So we understand that our models are correct. I think, Peter, you said something about learning. I thought was just exactly where we are. You've taken bus manufacturers, that there are other OEMs in the room who have been making diesel products since the beginning of time, and then you turned them around and said, right, off you go on this EV journey, off you go on this one. Under no circumstances were they going to get it right to begin with. They've got it almost right, but there's a genuine tweaking that comes through software, through understanding battery technology, understanding heat, topography, everything that comes with it. We're actually at a point now where I think every day we're getting better, but it's working with people like yourselves, it's working with the operators and understanding how that works. And that's the joy of what's been touched on. It takes all of us to join up to make sure that we can deliver this service. And the OEMs are very much a part of that, but not the entire part of it by any means. And I think one thing and we're quite delighted in where we've ended up. It's a business that was very much nothing in 2019 to get to 650 vehicles this year. I think the thing that we're really proud of is we are just over 80% zero emissions at the moment. And the other 20% is a tiny bit of hydrogen and some diesel buses. And, a business that when it came out of administration had 57 employees it's actually over 1,100 for 2023. And the only way at the moment is up, and we're pushing to get to that market share. We are delighted in the fact that we are the only UK fully owned manufacturing company, something we're very proud of. Very strong order book. We're building for the UK market. Delighted in the technology we have, and more from us as the day goes on. Very much.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. Next up, we've got Jake from Rock. I don't know, there he is, up there, to come and talk about leasing models for zero-emission buses.
Awesome, thanks Tim, and thanks Tom, and great to be here. I guess I'll just give you a quick background personally to myself. So I joined Rock about a year ago now, but spent most of my time at Cummins developing battery electric products and powertrains for commercial vehicles, both on and off highway, and then moved to Rock about a year ago, looking at specifically electric buses. I'll give you a bit of an intro, I guess, to Rock. So Rock was formed in 2011 and has since become one of the leading developers of transport infrastructure assets across the UK and Europe. And really it was founded to fill a void in the availability and development post PFI, offering kind of effectively direct institutional investment into transport assets. To date, we've invested just over 3 billion. I think we're about 3.1 billion, mainly into rail. So you'll see on the timeline, we have 7 train fleets comprising around 200 trains, and that's around 1,600 individual train cars. And then we just closed the Abellio deal in November for the 30 right buses. And so we're starting to move into the bus sector now, as we saw a lot of similarities within the rail and the bus sector. Rock really acts as an originator and a developer, but also an asset manager, which is part of the role that I lead within the bus sector. So we don't just develop the projects, we also look after them through the whole life. And that's on behalf of our investors, but also Rock itself, and Rock own part of the investment. We'd really look at it for stable cash flows. So we look at it as an infrastructure project, and it's all around developing stable cash flows for institutional investors. So things like pension funds, and this is how kind of your pension fund would grow. And really, as I say, we've only really just entered the bus market. We've been looking at it since 2021. And closed this deal in November last year. And I guess you can see the timeline, the majority of that being rail assets, and then more recently, the bus asset with Abellio. Okay, so what is the Rock funding model, at least within the buses? So Rock provide the investment, so we buy the buses of the zero emission buses, and we will only buy zero emission buses, whether that be battery electric or hydrogen, on behalf of the operator, and then lease them back to the operator for the time period. We take risk on one, that it's a good bus, and that the bus will be used for its entire lifetime, whether that be the lease period that the operator has taken, or we will then release it later down the line. And we really manage, I guess, three key risks on behalf of the operator. So one that we talk about a lot is it a good bus? It's a small question, it's probably quite a tricky answer, but we do a lot of work looking at, is it a good bus? And all around the components that go into the bus, where those components are sourced, which Tom touched on one of the slides around sourcing. That's really important to us, and also the investors. We look a lot at battery performance and battery replacement risk, and really take that on behalf of the operator. So we will replace the batteries within the vehicles, and we take the risk on that. And then also the ownership. In London, there's buses can only run up to that kind of 14-year period. We will look at this asset across a longer life, and we will take ownership of that across that whole period, over that longer life. And we manage those risks on behalf of the operator. We do this effectively really through kind of short-term leases. We prefer kind of 5 to 8 year lease lengths. We will do longer. In the case of the Abellio deal, it was a little longer. And we do that really on behalf of the operator, so to transfer that residual value risk away from the operator. So at the end of the lease, if it's not a good bus, or it's too old to be operated, or they're having issues, the operator can hand that bus back to us, and we will take the risk on that we can find a new home for it. It also minimises the operator's balance sheet risk. I think through COVID, it's been pretty tough. But also operators may want to spend their money elsewhere, on infrastructure, on depots, on growth. So rather than operators having to shell out to buy the vehicles, we will buy them and give them a fixed lease for kind of the lease length. And really where we see this being beneficial is especially within kind of shorter term contracts or franchising. You know, in London, the franchising piece, franchising starting to be looked at or implemented in other cities across the UK. So this is where we really see leasing and kind of the shorter term leasing be beneficial. We give the operator complete quiet enjoyment. You know, we're not forcing the operator to use it only within one operation or, you know, strict guidelines. The operator's there to manage that and meet the route requirements and the passenger demand. That's not our role, and they do that best. So it's, you know, we give complete quiet enjoyment to the operators, and the same on the battery piece. You know, we give comfort around battery performance, and we give effectively a guarantee, a capacity guarantee on the battery performance, and we'll take the risk, and we will replace the batteries on these vehicles because we know they won't last the complete lifetime of the asset. And we do that through ourselves and also some industrial partners that we work with. And then the other piece is the asset management. So we provide kind of regular asset management, both back to our investors and work with the operator, and also the vehicle OEM through kind of regular monthly meetings, updates that focus on, you know, battery performance, vehicle performance, kind of wider trends across the market, what's going on. That's the other side of where Rock operate. So in terms of this project with the Twickenham depot, we really boiled it down into kind of two pieces. One was the implementation and then the kind of asset management side. So if we focus on implementation first, I guess a couple of key learnings was early engagement, having early engagement with the vehicle OEM, but also the operator makes such a difference. I think, you know, the guys have touched on it earlier. It makes such a difference getting things moving, especially in kind of the legal drafting, the financial offering, just starting to solidify that takes time, and early engagement makes a real difference. It's the same on the product and looking at the route and the refinement there. I think the second piece in terms of implementation was on product offering. Having a strong product offering in terms of technical product makes a huge difference. You know, we have to go out and convince the investors that this product is the right product for the operation being performed. We have to do technical due diligence on the vehicle, the powertrain and the battery. And the battery is a real piece that investors maybe aren't quite over the line on yet, but are getting there. So it's a real kind of piece of work to do the due diligence on battery and the work that goes into that. And that's all around life, around warranty, around cost, support, replacement. It's an area where having a strong product offering is really key. And then the charging infra on Twickenham, we didn't fund the charging infrastructure, but you know, it takes time. You've heard off the guys earlier speaking about charging infrastructure. It takes time to implement. Thankfully, Abellio have other depots that they've managed to be able to charge the buses at, while the charging infra at Twickenham has been installed. But it's complex and it takes time. So, you know, in terms of buying buses, it's all good if you've got electric buses, but you have to be able to charge them, and that really does take time. And then really on the active asset management side, one piece that we've learned, you know, telematics is key. It's key for us. It's key for Abellio in terms of the insights and managing that asset, really understanding what that asset is doing and how it's performing. And we have an in-house team that do that as part of the team that I sit in, and we work very closely with Abellio's team on that side. You know, we have regular reporting meetings. I think actually on the next slide I'll give you a flavour of kind of some of the reports that we generate. But having a good, strong telematics system is really important. I think having good relationships, not just with the vehicle OEM, but then the tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. You know, I touched on battery earlier. It's never plain sailing introducing. These were the first electroliners into England. You know, having good relationships with those tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers makes a real difference, and eases that transition. both for the operator and also for us. And just having that openness and transparency really does help. And then really it's just regular engagement. You know, we work super closely with Abellio, we work closely with Rights to really learn together on what some of the best practices are that we're learning, that we care about, what do Abellio care about, what do Rights care about, and just all together understanding really what makes this project a success, and then how can we build on that and learn from it. So I think those were probably the three key takeaways from kind of setting up the project and implementing it, and then also now going forwards the kind of the active asset management piece where we're really focusing on. I think this slide was just really a flavour of some of the active asset management that we do. So this was just a report that we took some of the dummy data out of, looking at bus performance. You know, so we really look at kind of both contractual data, so things like warranties, kind of contractual pieces as part of the MSA, and we monitor that both on behalf of Abellio and with them. But we also look at things like bigger trends, so reliability over time, macro trends. So, you know, what are the markets doing, what are interest rates doing, what are metal prices doing, things like that. To look at really holistically, how is the project moving, where could the project go, and are there any risks to the, you know, the three key risks that we looked at. And this, you know, this is the tool that we have. It's called Rockstar. And that's the in-house tool that we use. And this was just one of a flavour of the slides that we look at in terms of bus performance. And yeah, you know, it's not specific to bus, it's battery, it's macro trends, it's the whole remit. And I think, Tim, that was it. No, thank you guys. Thank you.
Great stuff, Jake. Thank you very much. Certainly, I think an area that is going to be growing in the bus sector going forward. So really interesting stuff. Thank you. We've got two more presentations left. Jed's going to come back from NLX to talk about turnkey solutions before we welcome John Eardley from Abellio to get their perspective. So, Jed.
Thank you very much, Tim. Like I said, you've heard from kind of some of the partners, some of the key players in providing this solution for Abellio. And like I said, I think it's come across quite clearly that it needs a multitude of different stakeholders and different partners to actually come together to provide an effective solution for the client. At Twickenham, we've put in 16 Alpatronic chargers, 150 kilowatts. We've upgraded them to, well, the body's upgraded to 300 kilowatts for potentially future proofing. As Craig's alluded to, there's 10 extra ways put in there. We put larger panel boards in, and by mistake, kind of, Craig, isn't it? We put bigger cables in, but that's a slightly other story. But I think we touched on it earlier about it needs to be the right vehicle, it needs to have a point of connection. That's almost a journey the operators need to come on. You know, getting your grid connection is crucial, looking at your fleet size. And then from that, then we can work with the operators, particularly on what is the right size charger. We don't want to be putting in large, expensive chargers. If we can get a small one, and we'll look at things typically like running boards. We'll look at schedules, Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedules, downtime between vehicles. So we'll make sure that the actual solution then fits the vehicle and the requirements of the client. And then it's over to Craig then to put it all in place. And we'll also offer a full O&M package then as well, which if Craig doesn't fit them right, he's going to have to come back and fix them. So I'm sure he'll do a good job on that. So we offer kind of a value proposition from NLX is that, you know, we're very keen to work in a modular fashion. We've heard today how the vehicles have been financed on this particular project. We've ensured that there's no capex costs for Abellio on this project, which I know is a key kind of selling point to them. So we can go the full kind of end of the spectrum and offer the e-bus as a service, where we purchase the vehicle, the battery, and offer all the charging infrastructure as well. Charging as a service on top of that. We can look at green energy and obviously the smart data as well. And again, with those kind of different commercial models, in this instance with Twickenham, it's charging as a service. So Abellio have got a set fee every month that they're going to pay for the duration of the contract. So certainly on our aspect of the project, they can budget accordingly going forward. Again, slightly different models on e-bus as a service and batteries as a service if you're utilising a battery. And obviously, if you bring a battery asset into the play as well, then obviously you've got an asset there that you can potentially use as well to trickle charge the battery in the daytime, use that to charge the batteries in the evening time, and have an asset then to monetize in demand response and other energy market activities. I think it's just shown that the electrified ecosystem is like a maze. Complex decisions need to be taken into consideration. Each depot, as we know, and certainly as I'm learning and finding out in my journey on the energy side, is that throw up different challenges, many different challenges. So it's not always the expected or the desired route that we want at the start, but what we are keen on at NLX and working with our partners is to actually do a deep dive, look back, what have we done wrong, what have we done right, how could we better interconnect with all the other partners? Because if we're not all working together, then it's very easy for a project to kind of fall flat on its face, and that's kind of what we embrace at NLX, is that partnership ethos of working with the client. And that's rather succinctly, that's me. So thank you very much. I'd like to invite John up to talk about Abellio. Sorry, I'm doing your job there, Tim, Anna, sorry.
Right, thanks, Jed. Hello, everyone. I'm John Eardley. I'm the Managing Director for Abellio London. And essentially, just want to thank everyone for coming today. Also thank the partners today as well, hearing all of the blood, sweat and tears have gone into the project so far, not just Twickenham, but other depots as well. And it just reinforces the fact that we know that we're working with the right people for these projects. So, as I say, I'm John Eardley. I'm the Managing Director for Abellio London. I've been with Abellio for 7 years now. I was previously the Engineering Director for 5 years, and I've been the Managing Director for about 18 months now. Prior to that, I'd spent 20 years at First Group, starting as a school leaver apprentice mechanic, and then I did a couple of years at Arriva as well. So I've been in the bus industry for about 27 years now. So Abellio London then is part of Transport UK. Within the wider group, we've got Greater Anglia, Merseyrail, East Midlands Railway and West Midlands Trains as well. So that's some of the things we're hearing from Jake around the financing for, from Rockrail, certainly some of our fleets that we see in Greater Anglia and East Midlands Railway. So Abellio London then, we operate around 10% of the London bus market. We've got 53 contracted routes. Each of those routes is 7 years. And we operate around 32 million miles per year at an average speed of around 8 or 9 miles per hour. So it's difficult duty cycles for these fleets. West London and suburban routes typically around 16, 17 miles per hour. Central London routes can be 5 miles per hour essentially. So I say again, duty cycles vary. Therefore, picking the right technology is key. The fleet is around 800 vehicles. We carry around 145 million customers every year on those vehicles as well. So lots of wear and tear, lots of stopping and starting, lots of hard work. We've got 118 electric buses in fleet currently. We started our electric journey in 2019 with Catano eCity Golds in Walworth Depot on route C10 and P5. And again, I'll come on to that in future slides, that lessons were learned. We've heard a lot this morning around we're all on a journey, and we are very much on a journey. Lessons were learned from that, and even just picking certain types of technology, making sure that you still got your options available to you to go elsewhere and not getting boxed into a very bespoke setup. But also, sometimes those projects, it's best to hit a hard project, as we heard from Craig around with the cobbles and the rails, is find that solution. You know, then for the next time you've got an answer for it, or actually, the next depot might be much easier. It's a lot more straightforward then. So we certainly found that with C10 and P5, with it being a difficult duty cycle that stretched the vehicle technologies and a very small charge window for the vehicles. So we'll have, with the committed work that we've recently won, we'll have over 200 electric vehicles into service from the end of the year. That will, at the 32 million miles per year, then that will make around 6 million of those miles, EV miles essentially, and growing further as well. As we saw from TfL's slide before, around all new vehicles entering the fleet since about late 21 now need to be zero emission vehicles. Got 2,500 staff, over 2,000 of those are bus drivers, and then we've got the support staff, back office staff, a growing team of people that are supporting the fleet and the assets, because now you go back to how we've run bus depots for many years: a bus, a fuel pump in a parking area, and a bus wash. Well, we've now got, we'll have as many chargers as we'll have buses essentially. So we'll have ever-growing fleet of assets that we need to manage. So we've got growing teams of support staff for that, and expertise both internally and outsourced through to the partners as well. And we've got, by default, we go DC. Essentially, we get the flexibility, we get the much smaller charge window from that. More and more of our EV routes are now going 24 hours. We need to make sure we get the right balance of charging spares, but also that fast turnaround of fast charging for the vehicle and get them back out into service then essentially. So just quickly then, hopefully it'll go on to the map is the next one. It might be the map's got a bit of a thing on it. Just click. Okay. Thank you. Cheers. So just a bit of context then around our sites then. So obviously we're visiting Twickenham depot later today. We've got 6 operating centres, 2 in central London, 1 in Croydon area, and then we've got what we class as our west depots then, Twickenham, Hayes and Southall. Our centre of gravity as a business is moving out west now. I think we've seen recently within TfL that there's more and more resources that are needed in outer London, and certainly in some of our West London networks essentially. So as I say, we started our electrification journey in Walworth depot back in 2019. We actually mobilised just as COVID hit. So we launched both routes in, I think it was the May and the June, I think it was, of 2020, which was interesting. And then since then, essentially, we've got to the point, and I think from the TfL slide from earlier on, where I think 50% of the depots will be energised at some point in the next 12 months. By September, all 6 of our sites will be energised then. A number of those depots have got all the power they need, essentially, for full EV, and some of them are working through in phases. So essentially, just a small summary there on the left-hand side around what that fleet makeup is then around zero emission. Very much a lot of the routes that we're winning in Walworth depot have moved to EV now. So that's a big depot, about 180 vehicles. So having half of those vehicles now by September time, more than half of those will be electric then. A mixture of single deck and double deck EVs. And then just moving down then through some of the depots that are just starting their electrification journey, essentially. So moving on then, there's been a lot of presentations this morning, lots of slides. You'd be pleased to know there's literally 2 slides keeping you from your cup of tea now. So and I've left the photographs off because you'll see the real thing when we go to the depot essentially. So apologies for the heavy text, but essentially for us as an operator on this journey, there's a number of things that we've taken away with this, the learnings that we've taken essentially. The first one is embracing the change. We've run buses in the same way for 100 years. They go out, they come back, we feed them and water them, we park them up and wake them up the next morning. A bit like we used to do when they were horse-drawn, essentially. Nothing's really changed. So the EV model flips that. Essentially, when you need to find somewhere to plug it in, it needs to be plugged in, it needs to be on charge for a period of time, and also then warmed up with preheat, essentially. It still needs to be tethered to the wall or to a charger, essentially, before it goes out the next morning. So the scheduling arrangements and the allocation of the fleet, all of that needs to be fully integrated now, as before it could just be clipboard and pen and pencil, essentially. So the first, for us, it was embracing that change. It's not the kind of thing when you start on your journey, we found that you just do electric in the corner of the yard. You've got to think about how this will look once all of your contracts have converted over. What the entire depot look like? So for us, it was very much looking at the future, looking at what this business would look like in 2030, essentially. So all of our new build sites, and we've built 2 brand new depots in West London since 2019 with a total capacity of around 200 vehicles. any new build is future-proofed in terms of its ducting that it needs essentially for battery electric, and we've factored in any loss of parking footprint for the infrastructure as well. As we heard from Craig, from the older sites, I mean, Twickenham is an old tram shed. We're also, when we break ground, we're future-proofing the ducting that we're running there as well, so we can expand without needing to break ground again. Beyond the tangible stuff, then into the software, we've heard from Rock as well around investment in telematics, which is key to optimizing battery efficiency and extending the life of the batteries and the vehicle assets, but also investing heavily in the scheduling software as well to make sure that first contact of understanding what do you need it to do, you've got that fully modelled and you fully appreciate it, and you can work through all the different permutations. So, whereas before you would just build a schedule for a bus, and then because it was a diesel bus that could run all day, essentially, and it used excess heat, waste heat, then to heat the bus, essentially. We need to be factoring in the HVAC systems and the effect on range and what that looks like in the winter, what it looks like in the summer, what it looks like at the end, the end of the 7th year. What does the battery condition look like, and will it be able to manage a beast from the east 4 consecutive days of really poor weather, running full HVAC systems with a full load of passengers? So it's modelling all that, making sure that you don't overspec it, but making sure you find the right balance, then that you don't find yourself deep into a contract with an asset that just doesn't work for the route. So again, investing heavily in the front end of it with the software for the scheduling is key, and then working through and sharing that with all of your partners as well. And again, I'll come on to it on the next slide, which is the last slide, is just around just keeping your technology options open as well. We're working with 4 different manufacturers at the minute with the fleet that we have. Some of that was the fact that they were building a particular type of bus that we needed. So with Switch, they were at the time they had an 8.9 metre single door bus on the market. Nobody else did. So we worked with them and understood their vehicles and made sure that it could work through into our schedules, etc. So we've got a wide range of vehicles in service now. We can do pretty much direct comparisons with those. So we're now starting to we've got similar vehicle types like the Wrightbus Electroliner and the ADL BYD E400 EV, running them because they're the same spec bus. They're a 10.5 metre double deck, 80 odd capacity bus. Is we can run them, and they've got all the digital blinds, so we can run them side by side on the same route and get a nice controlled data set, essentially understanding which is the most efficient. And then just understanding we've got different types, and again, because we've been on a journey, we've got different types of charger technologies that we're using, and so we can make some comparisons then about which ones that we like to use and which ones we don't. And then we've got some fairly bespoke installations, but again, that was partly due to where the industry was and where it was maturing in 2019 with the static battery solution we've got in Walworth, where we just didn't have the supply that we needed. So we've got a 1.4, I think it's 1.4 MVA battery, I think, on site there. I think just to essentially dampen out any peak that we have there. Again, lessons learned, understand what we might need to do if we go to a site that's short on power elsewhere then. And it's a model that we've got. We're Abellio London, but we're also interested in the franchise model outside of London and looking at Liverpool, looking at other parts of the north as well, to see where we can take our region-ready model and deploy what we do in London elsewhere then as well. And again, the key there is engaging with the right partners early and just working together to find the right solution for that site, essentially. And that's a broad range of the software, the hardware, the assets themselves. Actually separating the bus from the battery as 2 separate assets and understanding them and their needs and how you'll care for them then through their life cycle, but also just making sure that you've got the right financing options in place and things that just open yourselves up to people, to that specialism and expertise it can bring in to really optimize the solution for you then. And then final slide really is beyond the embracing the change was just 3 things really, starting from the end and working back. So this, not just doing electrification in the corner of the yard, because if you just do that and then scale up, you'll run out of space before you've filled the depot essentially. And you realise that you've lost 20 to 30% of your previous diesel capacity. So work through to understand what whether it be electrification, whether it be hydrogen, just understanding what a zero emission solution would look like for that entire site. And pick a technology then. We know in London, because we work through route contract by route contracts, typically 20 buses at a time. Hydrogen's not an easy fit for London because of that. It needs scale to start with, whereas with battery electric, you can get the right infrastructure in under the ground, and then just scale up essentially if you've got the right capacity with the supply coming in and the right ducting and cabling and the right specification beneath. You can just basically bolt on, I'm oversimplifying now, but you can bolt on chargers. As you buy buses, you buy chargers essentially. So yeah, it's starting from the very end and then working backwards and then building it up in phases, where that's built by route contracts, whether it's built by available power, understanding particular corners of the yard that you might want to energise first to make sure you get the right space efficiency from it. Even things like having to change walkways. I mean, we've considered some depots are clockwise depots, some depots are anti-clockwise depots, which was, you never needed to worry about that with the diesel, but understanding where the charge plug is on the bus can really limit essentially how many, you can force yourself to put islands in where you weren't going to put islands in essentially. So things that we've never had to consider before. And then just again, planning for next generation technologies, not just building for now. We've talked before around the chargers themselves are in a sense over-spec'd, but we can improve them, we can ramp them up as this next generation of the Electroliner or other vehicles start to come on stream then over the rest of this decade. And then again, I've talked about breaking it down into phases then, and then finding that balance of keeping your technology options open. We default to DC because it gives us the flexibility in, we can charge the bus faster, shortens the charge window. We therefore need fewer vehicles then to run a 24-hour service essentially. But we've had some cases where that's not been needed. So then you can take those options and start working through some slightly more bespoke options. But we chose those carefully because the bus itself in question for the AC solution we have is a bespoke bus. So we knew full well that we can just design a solution, infrastructure and vehicle for that route. Whereas where you have a more generic vehicle like the Electroliner that could be used on dozens of different routes, making sure we didn't build it to too fine a specification where they currently run on the Route 111, which runs Kingston through to Heathrow. We've gone for the larger battery version. We could have quite easily, looking at the Queen's data, we could have quite easily chosen the smaller battery version. But we chose the larger battery version because then if we lose, hopefully we won't, if we lose the 111 contract in 6 years' time, then those vehicles can then be redeployed onto a different route because we know full well, like a diesel bus, we know it can go anywhere, we can use it anywhere. So it's keeping those options open essentially where you can. And then the final one, which is probably the most important one really, is pick your delivery partners and just really make sure that you're all fully aligned. And that the point there, assessing the interdependencies of each other and just understanding those lead lags around consent, or also just understanding who needs who to deliver what essentially. And the one that I've underlined there, if there's one thing that we've learned, is that just getting to the point where you just make sure that your contracts don't have more moving parts in your buses, basically, because that can quite easily happen. And what you don't want to be doing is with partners, and when they are partners, is then partners turn into contractors and you start quoting clauses and sub-clauses to each other essentially. It's that trust that you build, working with the right people, being open and honest with the journey that we're all on. As we've seen this morning, it just gives me real heart that we're working with the right people essentially, that say we've all been open and honest with each other. So I think, and again, the final thing I'll say really is that events like this and the Zemo partnership itself, this is where you find those partners, events like this essentially. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you everyone for your presentations today. I think we've hopefully shone a light about the complexities of all these projects and how collaboration and partnership working is so key from day one. So thank you for being so honest and open and transparent about all the trials and tribulations you faced during these projects. Hopefully everyone has taken something away from those presentations. You'll be glad to hear we've got a refreshment right now. So if you could be back in this room about 11:45, you're free to stay in here. Refreshments are available back where we started. Tea and coffee is available there, or just feel free to stretch your legs. Such a wonderful day, be a shame not to. And yeah, we'll see you soon for a Q&A session. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're feeling all suitably refreshed and ready to go again. Here's the main man, Craig. No worries. Just waiting for a couple more. So the next section of the event until about 12:30 will be an open Q&A session for anyone in the room and anyone online. We've got quite good attendance online, so thank you for joining. While you all think about what questions you want to ask, then please put your hands up. I've got one to start us off online, and I should say, if you've got a question, please name who it's for or if it's for everyone. We've got quite a packed panel, as you can see. So open question to the whole panel, quite an interesting one. What are the most significant safety and security hazards related control measures that had to be considered when implementing an EV charging fleet at a bus depot? Anyone feel free to take that. To start with, Jed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think health and safety is kind of our number one priority when implementing an EV solution. It's kind of one of our main priorities before the project starts in the pre-planning stages is health, safety, environment, and quality element of the work, and it's something that we work on very closely certainly with Craig, Clean EV side, from our side on the installation of the chargers, and we work closely with contractors then to ensure that from a general health and safety point of view that everything's covered, risk assessments and other things as well. So on the electrical side, Craig.
Yeah, I think basically it's a construction site. It's a dynamic construction site, so we pull everything back on the night and give it back to the client, so we can't leave plant unattended, trenches not covered over. So it's not a traditional construction site where it's hours, we get it back at 10 weeks later. It's completely dynamic and moving, and we touched on that. It's more about liaising with the client and the depot manager to make sure everything works right.
John, do you want to come in on that?
Cheers, thanks. Yeah, I think just three parts to it. I see the installation itself, which the guys have covered there around, the fact that it is a working construction site essentially, and I think just making sure it's isolated at the end of each working day then, and it's all packaged up and all safe. I think we've had to divert walkways, we've had to change traffic flows, we've had to do all sorts of different things, but again, it's that working closely together and being fully aligned that we've not seen any real material interruption to the depot. You'll see in Twickenham, it's 150 bus depot, so quite a large depot. It's only got one entrance exit, so it's very easy to snooker yourself if you're not careful. It is full, it's a full site, so even when you've got the swimming pool dug out, essentially parking a fleet and drivers, engineers, cars and things, it gets quite complicated. But I think working closely, making sure everyone fully understands each other and what the requirements are, I think are key. So I think the installation, that's the risks that we need to consider in all the mitigations and controls. You then got the life of the infrastructure itself and the safety risks around that. So making sure that you working the right people to actually procure and install high quality infrastructure, and making sure that you understand and everybody understands how and where it can be isolated from. We invited London Fire Brigade down and the Blue Light Services to come and look at all our installations to make sure that they're comfortable and they're familiar with the site as well. So they've got site plans, etc., etc. And then I think over that working life, then when we were talking before around how you plan for start at the end and work backwards, is building in those escape lanes, building in the access. We need to think about access to some parts of the infrastructure that might need 24-hour access. There's no point having the whole system down and the buses can't move out of the way, but no one can actually get access to the infrastructure to change that. So that's, for me, the second part, is making sure that's all fully worked through. And then the third one is around the vehicle itself as well, and understanding the risks both when the vehicle's on charge in the depot, and that's factored into the risk management around the infrastructure on charge, but then working with the OEMs, understanding what work's being done around battery containment and protection, the different chemistries involved. But again, working with TfL on that. And I think TfL, through their bus safety standard, have been leading the way on making sure that that's understood, and making sure that a London compliant bus meets the highest sort of criteria, essentially, in terms of battery safety. But I think we're on a learning curve with that one, definitely. I think everybody is.
Certainly lots to consider. Does anyone else want to come in on that, Peter?
Yeah, just very quickly, I guess electrical safety comes in at the very beginning when you're talking about design of the network. Really important on EV systems that we've moved from competent people touching and operating electrical networks to the average man in the street operating electrical networks, and that's a different scenario. So for me, electrical safety and the fact that we can't have, we call, touch potentials between electrical apparatus and metallic infrastructure around the depot is really important. So we go into that in really quite some depth to make sure that the general public are safe and the operators of the network are safe, with the bringing high voltage onto site and then transforming it down to low voltage, making sure that that earthing network does what it's supposed to do and operate the network on fault, and the fact that people don't get potential between different metallic objects on site when they're handling charger equipment. So I think that from an electrical point of view, safety is of paramount importance to us.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you. And just to bring in Jake and Tom, we've got another question online. You mentioned, Jake, that you don't expect the batteries to last the duration of the bus's life. So I guess, and like I said, open to you, Tom, as well. Can you tell us more about how you plan to replace or recondition the batteries midlife? And are there any plans to recycle or reuse the batteries afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, as you're aware, the end goal will be to have a battery that lasts the same amount of time as the bus's life. We know that the technology is not there at the minute. We look at this as what we would like to do is only replace it once. So we buy the bus new, it has batteries on, and we will look to replace that effectively at a midlife point. We do that through, we build up a cash reserve, and we look at the market where we think battery prices will go, who's got the right technology. And effectively we're kind of technology agnostic in that sense. But we also look at, what Wrights do. They've been very smart in choosing a standard VDA module. So there's opportunity to potentially either upgrade the batteries, the modules that are within the batteries themselves, or have replacement if we have issues. So there's a lot of work that we do, kind of talking on that due diligence point, around ensuring what the product is today can either be replaced or refurbished at that midlife point. And then I guess touching on kind of second life piece, we see these assets, or the batteries, as an asset as well. And we're actively engaged with both second life partners, where, looking at stationary storage, whether we sell the product on or whether we lease that product and kind of sweat it again. And then really effectively a third turn of that product is, the recycling. And when that product really, refines and goes back to its raw materials. So, there's a lot of work understanding kind of what we do and where we will do that. We won't do that. We are, looking for partners in that space. But Wrights have done really well in selecting a really good battery product that enables us to open the door in the future.
Yeah, I mean, all I can do is agree with that in the sense that we're obviously at the start of the journey, and when you get to the fact that you know, in 7 or 8 years' time, it could even be 9 for all we know. We are working with the likes of Rock to make sure that we have, you know, there are answers to those questions in the sense of regen batteries and also recycling batteries. Partnerships are what we're looking for going forward.
Great stuff. John, yeah, feel free.
I think from our perspective, I know the journey that we've been on and looking at different manufacturers and different battery technologies. I think some of those early conversations from a few years back, you know, the batteries themselves you know, it needed to last at least 7 years essentially, and some of the technology at the time, that was a stretch for them. So essentially, that, you know, if we got a battery that we couldn't guarantee the life of for at least 7 years, then there's no way that we win any work in London if you're pricing a battery change in the first contract. Now, those conversations have developed, and we hear that, you know, with optimizing through sort of battery management and through telematics, just managing the life of that battery, you can now take it to, you know, 8-9 years essentially. For us, you could say, well, you know, we don't really care until it gets to 14 years. But actually, the real conversation is when it gets to 10.5 years, we then start to engage with TfL as the client and saying, well, these buses should be able to do 3 contract cycles. And as you say, you change the battery once, but when you look at other heavy industries like railway or aviation, where the airframe might last 40 years and railway carriage might be refurbished a number of times over its life, what used to perish a bus before was the engine Euro rating or its step entrance essentially. Now, past all that, and potentially we're not far off big red boxes, and very nice big red boxes, but we've taken the engine out, so we've got a more open sort of customer environment now. It's probably in its end game state or not far of its end game state. So that bus could last 20+ years easily. So it's how we get the battery technology to sort of come along with that essentially and maximise the life of the bus as an asset, really.
Thank you very much. Does anyone in the room have any questions? Yes, if you could say where you're from, what your name is, and who your question's for, that would be great.
Hello, Dominic Schofield. I'm an independent consultant in sort of transport emissions. There was a lot of talk of maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I suppose, about bus range and looking at the idea of opportunity charging at either end of routes. Now, I'm guessing that there are reasons why that isn't happening or, you know, hasn't been talked about. But I was just interested in what is that something that you looked at, and what's the thing that if it's not something that's really practical at all, what's the key kind of thing that kills it?
But I think from an operator perspective, I think there are lots of benefits to opportunity charging, essentially, in terms of using a much smaller battery, charge at a faster rate. Essentially, you can maximise the range, essentially. But the limitations that it does have is that, as we saw through the pandemic, when the real benefit and the real value of a bus network is its agility and its flexibility. You know, overnight, you can decide that bus is now going to turn left at the end of the road and not turn right. That was impossible to do with the tube network, but with the bus network, it could cover the gap. So if the network needs to change quite dramatically, it can change. When you've got heavy duty in-depot charging, you're essentially doing the diesel thing, essentially. Then with opportunity charging, where you put that infrastructure on the route could potentially limit the agility of that network. Now, if you do it at scale, then it doesn't matter. If you're doing it specifically on particular corridors, then you do limit what you can do with those corridors then, in terms of how you can use the bus asset, but also getting full utilisation from the infrastructure. But the benefits for opportunity charging are enormous. It's clearly popular across Europe and other markets. I think for where we are now, and again, it comes down to working with a local authority to make sure that it's fully understood that placing that on-street infrastructure, or whether it be in depot infrastructure with the right battery chemistries, where you can essentially get pretty much the diesel stabling equivalent of zapping the bus and parking it up, so you don't need to worry about having it tethered to a charger for all night. Those things need to be worked through, and you see some trials that have been done in London now with the likes of Go Ahead and other operators as well. I think Arriva are doing the same thing. So I think it works, but I think those are considerations around just that loss of flexibility ultimately when the network needs to change. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. Anyone else got any questions from the room? Yes, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Bradley from the UK Coach Operators Association. I'm just interested from the fact you've now been operating electric buses for 4 years or so. How are the early ones holding up? How are they going? Realizing that, of course, they were early versions, but how's the structure holding up? How are they doing?
They're doing okay. Yeah. It clearly, and I was only talking in the break as well around the it was a blessing in disguise for us really when the first route that we won was the C10 route in Walworth, and that was a single deck route. It had some challenges on the route as well around fragile bridges and things like that, so we had to be careful around vehicle weights, etc. But it really stretched the range of the bus because the average mileage for the schedule was quite high for the technology at the time, but also the charge window was really quite small as well. So we centered on the DC solution for that, and we used the Catano eCity Gold for it essentially, with the NMC batteries in there. That is a difficult route, so we have to take that into consideration when we're comparing it to some of the what we class as the lazier routes that we have. So, for example, in Walworth Depot, where the third route that we electrified was Route 63, which is the new high-spec London buses that go past Palestra there from King's Cross down to Honor Oak. That's a lazier route. So if we'd chosen that route first, there's a good chance we might have been lulled into an AC solution there, and then we would have had to unpick that when we then won the C10. So I think we were boxed into picking a particular technology, but the bus itself has to work really hard on that route and has stood the test of time for it as well. So I think we've definitely been on a journey with it, ourselves and all our partners involved. But yeah, they've definitely held up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions in the room? Otherwise, I can just. Oh, yep, we've got one more.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Darren McCormick, Product Principal Engineer at Alexander Dennis. Trying to think of a question that would be suitable for most of the panel. So my question is around vehicle to grid opportunity. Is this something across the panel that is being understood? And is there a commercial benefit versus the impact on battery state of health?
It's a good question, and I think it's one that is sort of it's the future, isn't it, in terms of battery to grid. Battery to grid, as far as an IDNO is concerned, and a DNO, currently gives a negative effect on income to us. We get a very low or negative GWOS charge for generated electricity, and that would be an issue to us. So the sites have been modelled basically on load and not generation at this current state. I have to say that's where we are. That isn't to say that technology won't come in, but I think we'll be having a conversation with the regulator at that stage to sort of say the network was designed in such a way, and our income is based on a load-related application, that it's now changed. But I do see that coming, whether it comes in the bus environment, because obviously, when is the time that they can not do with that charge on their bus? I would suspect that it's probably limited, because they want those buses out and operating, so they want them charged up. So I think it's limited, but the technology will spread across the EV world without a doubt, and other technologies or other applications will want to use that route. But currently, it will give us a negative impact, so we don't model it as such. Hope that sort of answers your question.
Does anyone else want to come in on that from the panel?
Yeah, so we've worked quite a lot on vehicle to grid. We've installed quite a bit of 7 kilowatts over the years and looked at some quite big schemes over the UK. To me, it's the holy grail for these types of systems, but not for buses, because the buses are such a short time scale to get them charged. There's no capacity there, but fleet, 100%. If they finish their routes at 5 o'clock, whatever it is, it's a post wagon, DPD, whatever it is, that battery can be utilised on an evening at peak times. Whether it stacks up financially with the battery and the life of it, I don't know. I can't answer that, but the technology is coming. It's coming quick.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Craig said there, is that the downtime with the vehicles isn't particularly good in the bus environment. They're out for long periods of time. The downtime then is quite small, so they're being charged up. But I think we're also getting to a position where now it's a transition in the energy market, in respect that organisations now are actually selling the energy back into the grid system, which is almost a unique situation where we've been to in certainly in recent times and years. And I think vehicle to grid will certainly become a reality in the short to medium term, whether or not within the capacity of the bus market at the minute it's applicable, but I think it's on its way. Yeah.
I think as well, just from kind of more of an asset side, we buy these assets for the operator. They're there to run passenger service. They're not kind of stationary storage pieces. The impact on battery life and throughput potentially will become challenging. Abellio run these vehicles hard. That's what they're there to be done. It's a potential. Currently, it's not what we would look to favour them for. I can see the benefits, and if the battery technology, improves a little further, it may be something that we could look at. But the detrimental impact on battery life at the minute, just it doesn't outweigh the financial kind of offset, and then the impact that it has on the operator. The buses are there to carry passengers.
Great stuff, thank you. Is there anyone else? Yep, we got one at the back.
Thank you. Stuart McMurray, Goa Sendor. Probably it's aimed at the operator. The message today clearly is to have a really good partnership, and you've got a lot of good learning in the years that you've gone on. Going forward, do you feel that the operator still has to do too much during this transition, and do you see a future where this gets easier? I know you've got a winning team, but it still looks really tricky.
It is really tricky, but I think what we've heard today, from certainly when Jed talking about the sort of turnkey solutions, I think that for me is, as an operator, and thinking about, we're swept up in the TfL network essentially as one of a medium-sized operator. We hold a strange space in the London network where we're the biggest of the small operators and the smallest of the big operators, essentially, all at the same time. So we don't have a huge technical back office or delivery teams, etc. So we do lean in heavily on our partners. So I think the more and more of these more mature turnkey solutions that are available, I think certainly independence, I think the coach market essentially as well. I think there's lots of learnings that we've been on this steep learning curve over the last 5 years, that if we were operating elsewhere in the country, we potentially wouldn't be anywhere near where we are now, essentially. So still lots to learn, but there's lots that we've banked now that's in our playbook. But I do think these turnkey solutions and consolidating the number of partners that you work with, I think that's key to it. But certainly as the market opens up now and it goes beyond the big four and big five and into smaller operators, and also the coach market, which you would say potentially long distance coach might favour hydrogen in some ways, but it's not always the case with that. So it's just understanding, it's just making sure that these businesses can reach out to somebody who can give them an unbiased opinion on what's the right fit for them, essentially. Yeah.
Really interesting question. Jed, yeah, go ahead.
Just very briefly, yeah, I think John's mentioned it. It's the partnership is a key element here, and I think if Ken was here from Abellio, I think he'd say there's actually a bit more we could probably do to help as well from a kind of a deep dive and looking back situation. Is that for every kind of depot that we kind of implement a solution for or go back for phase 2, is actually looking at what's gone wrong, what's gone right, what can we improve on, how can we, all of us here, if the bus isn't delivered on time, if the battery isn't there, if the chargers aren't delivered, if the cables aren't there, it needs us all to be working together. And I think there's always more that we can do as a solution provider at NLX to keep continually improving our service offering for clients. So that's what we aim to do.
Thank you very much. A sort of final call for any, yes.
Mahendra Kumar from Cummins. My question is about DC fast charging. What is the optimum charging time we have on buses? Like, are you expecting something which is happening on passenger car side, where people are expecting 0 to 80% in like 30 minutes? Do you see any value of that and reduction in the battery sizes on the buses because of that?
The battery technology is changing all the time, and fast charging is obviously something that we want to offer for our batteries. And as we progress through the journey of getting different batteries from the suppliers, that will change. We are limited by the products that we have at the moment. I think the guys who do the charging infrastructure might be actually better at answering that than I can. I don't see, do you think, are you asking the question in the sense that you'll have car and bus doing the same thing?
Essentially, like there is a trade-off what you can make, right? So I can go with a 300 kilowatt hour battery pack and I don't use opportunity charging, right? So, or otherwise I can go with 100 kilowatt hour and I go for opportunity charging and reduce the total initial cost of the equipment, right? So is that something which would be trend going forward?
I think every bus route is different when it comes down to it. I mean, I think we've touched on that today, is that there's not a standardization. The one thing that's come out of this conversation with everybody is that every single depot is different. Every route is different, and one size does not fit all. The question was asked about opportunity charging in the sense of, and we can't guarantee that. There's funding coming for different routes as we approach every single depot, every electrification either, or every zero technology, that being hydrogen as well. Every single one is a project, and every single one is different. And all technologies are on the table for the people operating and for the suppliers to that market. And really, the best fit is very different for each location. So yes, the answer is yes and no in the same breath.
John, do you want to come in? Or Craig, go first.
Yeah, I think as well. I think it is that point that there are different needs, but I think it's finding that balance between not being too bespoke, and then also, making sure that you've got that flexibility in the fleet. And I think, as I said before, we default to DC charging. That first step for us with the C10 meant that we had to. So we learned a lot, and I think for probably about 18 months, we were the only operator running DC at the time in London. And that was a difficult cost model to try and build them, because a lot of the costs are front-ended. I mean, the charger is a lot more expensive than an AC charger. I think some manufacturers were giving away AC chargers, like with air freshener and mats, and a free charger. Really, that's whereas you've got significant cost for a DC charger, but the model itself, where you've got a much shorter charge window, meaning that you've got less reliance on charge spares. When you start looking at some of the early routes that we were winning 24-hour routes that were running the day route with electric buses and the night route with hybrids. That model's changing now, because we're getting to the point where we've got a DC solution with a high capacity battery that can be charged quickly, and you can charge these vehicles in 2.5 hours essentially. But where the technology is going, and again, we're talking about making sure you future-proof the infrastructure, but then making sure you're working with the right vehicle manufacturer as well, is that what does the next generation look like? Because we're talking about having a solution where you've got every bus plugged into a charger at night, where if you've got fast power, where you've got opportunity charging in depot, where you can just blast it on its roof as part of the processing of the bus at night, then you can almost do like a valet system. Then you can just have them charged and then they move deeper into the depot, where all the infrastructure is in one part of the depot, and it just moves as part of the stabling and processing of the bus at night. We talked before about, we've run buses in the same way for 100 years, where they just, we fuel the bus, we wash it at the same time we fuel it. We don't necessarily need to do that. It's just the fact that it's coming that way. We might as well do both at the same time. We can sort of throw the whole thing up in the air and look at how we manage these things essentially. So I think for me, it's it is keeping your technology options open, but DC solution, getting that bus charged as quickly as possible, leaves all those options open to them, because you can use fewer buses for the route itself, and trying to get that right fit for 24-hour fleet. I think you just leave all your options open essentially, and you've got with the DC, you've got the handshake with the bus, you've got all the communication, so you can do the telematics a lot more sophisticated than it is with AC as well. So it leaves your options open essentially.
Craig, do you want to come in?
Put my bit on this one. A year ago this week, was first depot went live, which was Hayes, and I think at the time it were all over spec. It was 300 kilowatt chargers, massive connection. Everyone were a bit nervous about are the buses going to have enough power. And looking back, I think we could, if Abellio have the same route going again, they wouldn't need any more charging. I think you just unplug it, wouldn't you, and just move the buses around. I think it's that good and that over spec that they're going to save millions on next route, hopefully.
Great stuff, and thank you for all the questions and online as well. Conscious of time, we've got 5 minutes left. One key takeaway. Let's do a quick fire for all the panelists. These workshops are all about tangible takeaways and learning lessons. So, one key takeaway from the project. Craig, do you want to go first?
We're always learning, aren't we? I mean, I'll be honest. We made a mistake on this job. I'll show you it. Some silly so I couldn't measure properly. That was from me, and we did the thing where the buses won't fit in, and oh no, so we just ripped it up and did it again, and that all fits perfect. I'll show you that on site. But yeah, we made a slight mistake. We just sorted it. We're always learning.
Yeah, I think the key for me is just how we're all interdependent on each other within this group, and there's also a lot of other stakeholders that aren't here today. You know, the DNO, the ICP, and others that collectively we all need to deliver a project. And so yeah, it's certainly the partnership ethos, really, from my perspective.
Yeah, let's not repeat it over and over again, but we are constantly changing what we're doing. We're constantly investing. We're bringing more and more people into the business. We have a different perspective, but we can't do this without the people that are in the room and the people who are excellent in their fields as well. We're adjusting our business to make sure we're respectful of everybody that does this, and we are very open to it. But every project we do comes with partners, and they are as important as we are.
Yeah, and I think the biggest piece we've seen is that collaboration across product, routes, operators, absolutely everything, and sharing the learnings. Being open. We're all in it together. We want the success of the project. And so, looking through all the telematics, looking through where the product is built and how it's built and who the suppliers are, going back through that tier 1 and tier 2 piece, that openness and that collaboration, I think is really important. And will only continue to be important.
So I think for me, it's two things. First of all, it's the client's honesty, because that matters. Matters when you're designing the project in the first place, and to understand their goals and to match up to their goals. I think that's really important. So their honesty, and I thank John for that in terms of honesty in delivering the project. But as I said in my piece earlier, don't forget land rights, because land rights are the key to success.
Thank you.
John, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, I mean, there's a theme here, I think, isn't there? And I think it's the line that I underlined in the presentation around, if you're working with people that you trust, and you work with people, don't work with businesses, do you? So you've got to trust the people that you're working with and the partners that you have. And I think that way, then you're not constantly tripping over clauses and sub-clauses in contracts and build specs and things. And many ways, and a lot of people all over the country, and a lot of these businesses have, you've got global projects running as well. You'll be breaking new ground, doing things for the first time, and mistakes will be made. I mean, when we did the first project in Walworth, we were doing some things that we just hadn't been done, and certainly in this country before. And it's, the final knockings of that were being done in lockdown. The final sort of, as we're just about to energize. So I think I was saying before, I felt like I was building a house over the phone in some ways. And it was like, when I go down, is everything going to be where we expect it to be? And I think just that working with people and just honesty and transparency with everybody. I think that, you know, that's key. I think the trust and the honesty, I think, and land rights. Absolutely, land rights. If you don't own your site, land rights. Yeah, yeah.
And on that, thank you very much to our panelists. Can we give them a round of applause? So the next piece of the day is the site visit and lunch. You'll be glad to hear. So how we're going to do this, the site is limited to about 30 to 35 people. There is a bright pink bus waiting somewhere around there. I think Alistair's nodding, it's here, that's good. So if we could sort of roughly split ourselves, if you need to get away or you want to go on the first trip to the site visit, please feel free. There will be high vis at the back. My colleague Emily will be handing them out by the door. Please do wear them, like I said. If you're not bothered about going to the site first, lunch will be waiting back over there. And then we'll swap over basically an hour later, about 1:30. Before we go and before we say bye to everyone online, Zemo is 20 this year, 20 years old. So we're having a big bash at London City Hall. You're all invited, members, only £49. What a bargain, I know. Once you see the agenda, you'll agree. Upcoming Zemo events, we've got lots of working groups coming up, helped by Emily and Naomi back there. We're also at other industry events. You can see that I won't go through them. And with that, I just want to say thank you all very much for coming. Thank you those online as well. Thank you to all our partners for making this event happen and for being so open and sharing such useful learnings. And with that, let's go to the site and have lunch.